Class, this is a video about the PEE paragraph structure. This is just a method of organizing your paragraphs, especially if you find that you keep getting comments where you are going off track or you're not connecting the dots, not explaining your evidence. If you force yourself into using this, it will really help both with your grades, of course, which is very important, and also just with making things clear for your readers. You can find this information in a handout that's also in this week's folder, but this will just kind of quickly go over some of the details of that. So this is what I call the evidence paragraphs, and this is the first of two examples of paragraphs that don't work. So in this case, I'm going to read this. Staples' sentences are really beautifully written. Staples says, quote, "It was in the echo of the terrified woman's footfalls that I first began to know the unwieldy inheritance I'd come into." He also says, quote, "At dark, shadowy intersections, I could cross in front of a car stopped at a traffic light and elicit the thunk, thunk, thunk of the driver, black, white, male or female, hammering down the door locks." So imagine this is a paragraph in a student's essay. If I break down that evidence paragraph, I have that first sentence that says, Staples' sentences are really beautifully written. So think of this, if this is my topic sentence, this is the first sentence, this is what I'm going to prove, so what? Why does it matter if they are beautifully written? It is arguable, but so what? The second sentence, Staples says it was in the echo, blah, blah, blah. Here's great evidence, right? But presumably we're putting it in there to prove that it's beautiful writing. But you're just assuming that I am going to see in that sentence that there is beautiful writing. So you haven't explained your evidence for me. Second example, this is a translation paragraph. What I call translation. So, Staples' beautifully written sentences illustrate his point. You can see we've gotten a little bit more arguable there, a little more clear and focused. He says, quote, "It was in the echo of the terrified woman's footfalls that I first began to know the unwieldy inheritance I'd come into. Here he scares the woman and understands what that means. He also says, at dark, shadowy intersections, I could cross in front of the car, da 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 da." Skipping down, this sentence shows Staples' craft with the thunk, 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 the use of dashes, and the word hammering. All right, so you can just see, you can look. There's more sentences in here. We've got the same two pieces of evidence, and then we've got a sentence after each piece of evidence. So it seems here like the author has explained something, has argued something. But if you look at it, he says it was in the echo of the terrified woman's footfalls that I first began to know the unwieldy inheritance I'd come into. Here he scares the woman and understands what that means. If you read that second sentence, you realize all the author has done is take that first sentence and rephrase it, translate it into the writer's own words. So they haven't really said anything about it, they've just summarized it. And the same thing goes for the second sentence in there as well. So instead, here's what we want to shoot for. We want to shoot for the PEE paragraph. The point argues what you will prove, the evidence that supports that point, and most importantly, the explanation. The explanation of how and why the evidence goes back and supports that point. All right, so here's our paragraph model, and I'm not going to read the whole thing. You can pause it and read it here, or you can see it also on the handout that's in this week's folder. But what you'll see is I've got the different fonts there to illustrate the different parts. The first part is the point. Staples frequently crafts beautifully written sentences that illustrate deeper themes. So if I just look at that, I know I'm going to have to argue not just what makes them beautiful, but also how that beauty ties into the deeper themes that he wants to make. And then I give a piece of evidence. A perfect example comes early in the essay when he unintentionally frightens a young woman walking late at night in Chicago. Staples concludes of the experience, "It was in the echo of the terrified woman's footfalls that I first began to know the unwieldy inheritance I'd come into." The rest of this paragraph is all explaining the significance of that one sentence there. So I take the time to go through and really help you understand what I'm seeing in there and explaining what I'm seeing so that there's no mistaking my interpretation. And if you notice, we've got at least 2/3 of this paragraph is explanation. Only maybe at the most 1/3 is evidence. And that's really what you should be shooting for, because anybody can go out and pull some evidence from places. But what really makes your paper interesting and unique and makes it you is what you do with that evidence. So how you can explain that evidence and make us understand the significance of it. So if you know you're having issues, and you'll see this in your essays, I'll have PEE paragraph written next to something. This is what I want you to be shooting for. Focus or force yourself into this format, and I promise you your writing will improve.